Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today the topic is pretty clear-cut for the most part. Basically today we're going to be talking about things that women find unattractive about men. So if you're curious, if you want to find out if you're doing something that's terribly off-putting to your significant other, then you might want to stick around for this. We're going to dive right in. What women tend to scare away from is when a guy shows that he's incapable of being able to handle his anger. Perhaps we're hardwired to feel deep down that a man who gets too angry presents a potential danger. Regardless of the reason, most women tend to find too much anger, displaced anger, and or a disproportionate amount of anger quite unbecoming. What at very first might come off as endearing, we might, for example, figure that a man who is quick to experience anger is also going to be the type of guy who isn't afraid to stick his neck out for us should we find ourselves in danger, loses its endearing quality rather quickly as we begin to observe situations where anger is directed against us, or the negativity becomes so unsurmountable that we start to feel uncomfortable, and or a number of other things that are in the same sort of vein. What's important to note is that a good handful of women will erroneously believe that they can help the man change, and she may stick around while harboring the belief that she can help the man get rid of himself of all that rage that seems to be simmering just underneath the surface. Of course, since it's never possible to change anyone who isn't 100% and then some receptive to changing, this only ends up digging the relationship even deeper. Eventually, the woman will call it quits upon realizing there's no changing your angry ways, or in rare cases, she may learn to adapt and settle. But neither of these scenarios is ideal. Both are unhappy situations with inevitably sad endings. So men, if you have a penchant for going from human to Neanderthal in under 60 seconds, and if you find that it's affected more than just one of your relationships adversely, perhaps it's time to get serious about fixing, or at least striving to tame the issue. Begin by putting the dating aside for a bit. It needs not be a priority for you just yet, and going to speak with a professional about your anger. Learning how to better manage your anger, not to mention uncovering what's at the root of it, will bring you many more dating prospects than you have at the current time. Even if it may appear to you that you have no problem attracting decent women, you might be surprised to discover all the women that start popping out of the woodwork once you have successfully dealt with any anger issues you may be plagued with. Every woman wishes her man could show just a bit more sensitivity about some subject every now and then. But when we find ourselves with a crybaby, we start to get inadvertently turned off. And do allow me to be clear about the fact that when I talk about this, I'm referring to a man who cries excessively, not a man who cries only now and then. The latter can in fact be a good thing. It depends on the woman. Shedding a few tears once in a while shows that you can be a man, and yet you're not afraid to let your guard down around us at the same time. But when our man is crying so much that we find ourselves at a loss for how to handle it, that's perhaps when we've crossed the line. When we say we like a sensitive guy, we don't mean we want a guy that needs a wad of tissues every time another ASPCA commercial comes on. So what exactly is the problem with having a big burly crybaby for a boyfriend? Well, here are a couple. For starters, naturally, we're going to wonder if he's all right, if he's depressed to a point we won't be able to deal with the situation, or else if he's right in the head. Females may be perceived as the more nurturing and comforting sex, but being in a relationship where we have to worry about the possibility of finding our man in a bathtub dead by self-inflicted wrist slitage is nothing your average woman looks to sign up for. Secondly, drawing from personal experience here, sometimes when a guy cries too often, it puts us in an uncomfortable and possibly unfair situation because we may will to help you in every way we can, but we just don't feel like we're equipped to do so with the tools that we have. My ex, for example, was a crier. I recall this being particularly difficult for me because as I sat there comforting him as much as I could, it seemed like these efforts on my part were ultimately rejected because of the fact that no matter what I or anybody else said or did, there would always come a time when the problem would re-arise with just as much force as it had ever had before. This, of course, serving to render myself, and I imagine anyone else hoping to try to offer some genuine help, feeling downright useless. This, of course, will drag a relationship down because who wants to feel like they're good for nothing, useless, or simply unable to help the one they've fallen for? Furthermore, nobody wants to put in such large sums of time and energy to think of just all the right words to say, etc., only to later on get slapped in the face by the realization that none of it did any good. Guys, if you tend to be overly emotional about things, it's understandable that this may be beyond your control, but make sure for one that we get that as your woman. What I'm getting at is that, guys, number one, is you've got to make sure you're honest with her about every aspect of your emotionality. if that's a word, or what you're being over emotional about. Think about it. If it's going to help keep your relationship together in the long run, and if she really loves you, there should be no problem. And if anything, it might help her sympathize and empathize, and in having gained new understanding about the matter, it may help with her patience and the way that she handles the matter as well. All in all, she may not be as quick to dismiss your emotions if she gets what's at the root of them. It's not so much the slacking that's the problem with the so-called slacker type of guy, as much as it is the lack of drive, motivation, as well as the lack of any goals or clear path in life that this type of a guy may possess. Don't get us wrong, especially depending on your age. Sometimes it's okay not to know exactly where you want to go in your life, or when you're older, sometimes it's okay to realize that a certain path that you chose is not okay for you and you want to change your mind. That's okay. It's all okay insofar as you don't lack ultimately any drive to achieve something, anything. I want to be clear with this one too, in that it isn't for a lot of us about making money. Unless she's an outright gold digger, which hopefully will make itself obvious soon enough, it isn't about that. Rather, it's about a person's disposition. There's undeniably going to be a small question about whether this guy is going to mooch off of us, which, come on, you've got to admit is kind of a fair concern, but it's far from being everything. There's just something attractive about a man who knows how to prioritize things in life, and to a lot of us women, that definitely includes hard work and being driven to succeed, and in some cases, as much as I hate to use the word, provide. This probably, without a doubt, dates back to the way back in time when men were the hunters and the ones responsible for providing pretty much everything for the rest of the family. If the man didn't or couldn't go out and work and provide, it meant the whole family went hungry. The men were the ones who sustained the family, and the women relied on that. Of course, we live in much more modern times now, and no one adheres too much to such archaic values any longer. There still lingers in both sexes something in our brains that still finds these traits to be desirable in members of the opposite sex. And I do believe it's a knee-jerk sentiment for which our bodily evolution has yet to fully catch up with our intellect. In some, modern women desire our independence, but we are also going to prefer a man who is on our same page as ourselves. A gentleman whom we can relate to in certain important facets of life. Yes, you guessed it, just future-oriented thinking and planning. Put simply, if we're a woman who wants things in life, we're going to much more readily and better hit it off with a guy who's similar to us in that regard. So if I'm a success-oriented woman who hopes to work her way up the ladder as much as possible in life, in corporate life, social life, or what have you, I'm going to definitely have a pretty strong preference for a man who feels the same way. That opens the door for not just better conversation, better sharing of ideas, etc. We also end up with two personalities that are going to mesh better, have values that are more in line with one another's, and in the end will just be more agreeable with one another in the long run. For our purposes here, let's look at a commitment-phobic person as obviously someone who doesn't want to commit for various reasons. Maybe they can't commit, or maybe they don't want to settle down with just one person as of this moment. For whatever reason, they just won't commit to an exclusive monogamous relationship with anyone, or at least a particular girl in question. This is just so we have a universally acceptable understanding that is, in a nutshell, our commitment-phobe. A commitment-phobe is generally thought of as a guy, although this quality is starting to spur more and more in women as well, from what I've noticed. But in our case here, it's a guy who's simply not ready yet for, marriage, stability, all that stuff. This isn't inherently wrong, by the way. People just want different things, and both partners are just by nature going to be happiest with people who are on the same page as themselves. This is therefore one of those cases where neither party is to blame for the other not being the best fit for them. It's still pretty pertinent that you don't try to force something, or for that matter, pretend to be something you're not, or pretend to want something you don't. Don't force yourself to change either. That's something everyone eventually comes to learn happens naturally, and whenever any type of interchange is rushed or demanded, it doesn't really work. A person needs to develop at their own pace. And whereas you meet a woman, she knows exactly what she wants, and on top of that, she wants it all now, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you if you should still happen to be very far away from that juncture yourself, and never let anyone try to tell you otherwise either. The fact is simply that being at such different stages in your own lives or development, you aren't going to be a good fit for one another. And that's okay, don't force it. Feel lucky that the worst thing you have to contend with in this scenario is to forget about this one and instead go and find someone who's more on your same page. This is really the best that both sides could really do, in fact. That is, once again, you both need to simply accept that you guys are different in a pretty major, possibly critical way, and try to find someone who's more on your same wavelength. Of course, it's certainly your prerogative to stick around and wait things out, although in my experience, that's probably not the best choice for reasons we won't really get into right now. It's too much. So now, the reasons women might not go for this should be mostly obvious, but let's run through them anyway for the sake of the discussion. First, if a woman herself is ready to settle down with that one special person, if that's what she's looking for in life, then evidently dating men who don't also want the same thing is going to be highly problematic. It's really going to be only a matter of time before the shit hits the fan. If she wants to be exclusive, but the guy continues to date around, whether behind her back or to her face, that's not something she wants. Occasionally, there are those situations we touched on where a man really likes a woman enough to try to be exclusive and settle down with her, even though that's typically not in his nature. I don't care how many times I have to say this, if someone's doing something that goes against their nature, if someone is forcing a certain lifestyle upon themselves, that too is something for which it's just a matter of time before it unravels. It's not going to be the happiest of relationships in the world for either partner. And no girl that's worth it is going to want their man to go against what's good for him either. If she does ask of you to change yourself in a way that makes you feel unhappy or unnatural, then you're probably better off with someone else anyway. One of the most unattractive things to me personally, as well as to probably quite a handful of women, is when a guy doesn't pay attention to us. I don't mean excessive attention here. I'm not talking about emotionally high maintenance women who were deprived of attention as kids and now as a result they demand constant and unrealistic attention from their boyfriends. Rather, I mean attention in the most basic, most humanly respectful sense of the word. Kind of like just as simple as giving someone the time of day, I guess literally and figuratively. In my humble opinion, it really shouldn't be too much to ask that our man pay attention to what we say when we talk. That is so important, and so many would think a no-brainer, but you would really be surprised at how many dudes just don't do this. I don't mean that as a guy you should have to remember every single detail of every conversation the two of you ever have, but simply just be respectful, be alert and responsive, be just as you would any other human being or stranger you just met. Alright, so why chicks hate this? If again it's not really obvious, the reason we're not attracted to this is because when we embark on a romantic relationship with someone we consider good long-term dating material, one of the things we want, nothing more than, is to be able to share every aspect of us, our lives, ourselves, our thoughts, and yes, this is mushy, our feelings, with this new person in our lives. And when we discover that we can't do that, or that the new guy isn't receptive to that, it's naturally going to bum us out. Having been in this situation myself, I can vouch for the fact that for a lot of us, the part that hurts the most in all of this isn't so much that you didn't listen. Rather, it's the thought that our partner doesn't care enough about us to listen or to want to hear what we have to say. And if it's done once, that's forgivable. Twice, okay. But if it's just on a repeated basis, it can really start to tear at any human being, understandably. So it's not that a lot of us don't have friends or relatives we can share with, but sharing things with a romantic partner is different. It's more intimate, or rather it gives us a sense of security that we don't necessarily need out of any of those other people. And we want to be able to do that, and we want to know that we're able to do that. And like I explained before, we want to feel like you're interested because you care. Guys, I dare you to tell a good woman that you don't care about her and see how long that relationship lasts following that statement. Take a minute if you need to, because after that, I want you to take another moment to let it sink in that it is really no different when you don't pay attention to her. That's essentially a gesture equivalent to the act of saying to her, I don't care about what you have to say, I don't care about what you think or feel or what happens to your life, and furthermore, I don't even care if it hurts you to know this. Some you might even say that all translates to plainly mean, I don't care about you. For these reasons, my simple advice is just that. If you truly care about this woman, it shouldn't be an effort to pay her the attention that she wants and needs. But in the event it is something you're finding you have to work on, then my advice is to do all you can to be receptive to her. Listen to her when she speaks as much as you can. Of course, the worst thing you can do is just patently ignore her outright. And let me just say it again. that if you're dating a truly confident woman, it's only a matter of time before she decides to stop putting up with that and find herself someone who does listen. Because when you're ignored, you kind of feel like crap. Then there are other various aspects of being paid attention to that we enjoy from our partners as well. Take thoughtfulness, for one. For example, let's say that it's a random day and the two of you are just enjoying a day out or just running errands, maybe doing a little window shopping, that kind of thing. Then say you walk by a store that has this sweater on display in the window. And let's say that your girl comments on what a cute sweater it is. Well, a thoughtful thing to do, and this is the type of thing that I personally not just enjoy as a woman, but also find myself blown away by in the rare instances that it happens, would be to make a mental note of this, and then later on, in your free time, go out alone and buy the sweater for her to give to her as a Christmas present or a birthday present, I guess depending on what time of year it is. Believe me in that in most cases, she will appreciate your thoughtfulness and the fact that you listened so carefully more than you'll probably ever know. Well, friends, I'll be honest in saying that it's pretty likely to expect a part 2 of this video sometime in the future. Because of my list of things I could conclude with, it wasn't easy selecting just one. That said, after just a quick reminder that this list is by no means extensive, let's get to our final point, which I chose in part because it's along the same lines as our previous point. So here we go with our last but not least, number 6. We've talked a little here and there about different kinds of communication, sorta. Maybe not. But now at either rate, maybe you could say that it's time for the big one. What I'm saying is that there's very little more off-putting to a lot of us women, a mate who cannot or will not, for whatever reason, hardly communicate with us at all. In fact, this is off-putting in so many ways that I'm hard-pressed for even where to begin. But let's see. First of all, without any or little communication, or good communication rather, it's naturally impossible to achieve just about anything within a marriage or a partnership. Arguments are hard to understand, much less resolve. We fail to understand the other person's point of view, whether engaged in an argument or not, if they don't share their point of view with us. Furthermore, our partner may continue to remain a mystery, albeit not in a good way. Rather than come off as mysterious in the likes of, say, how a Casanova would, our man's going to come off as lacking substance or as having nothing to him. A relationship void of quality communication is a recipe for an extremely boring relationship. If you just happen to be that way, however, guys, maybe you're simple, you don't like drama, and to you that's bred from complexity. Or maybe you really only have one or two really big interests in life, and to hell with all the rest of things. But let me just say straight up, that isn't inherently bad, and it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you or that you're boring. The only problem is that a majority of well-intended women, I'd venture to say, are going to want a little more out of you. And if communicating really isn't in your nature, it's probably only a matter of time before she realizes that pulling teeth is very stressful and no fun. So what should you do about it then? This is one of those points where my advice doesn't come easy to say, whereas I would never condone a person changing anything about the core of who they truly are. If what you want is a relationship, you've naturally got to ask yourself whether working to change yourself in terms of becoming a communicator is a sacrifice that's worth making or not. In the end, I would say not. In that, no, ultimately, I don't think it would pan out well for you to attempt to change this attribute about yourself. And here's why. Even though it widens your dating pool or your pool of prospective dates, in the end, it will be far more important for you to find the person that is a right fit for you. Attempting to change yourself in this regard isn't going to ultimately work. It won't yield good results, believe me, since it's something that doesn't come naturally. Just as with our last point that we were just talking about, it will always come across as forced or strained. Even if you manage to fool others into not being able to tell the difference, you're still going to feel it within you. It's going to tug at you inside, and you'll never be genuinely happy putting on this charade of being a master communicator. That's why, in my opinion, the best bet is to simply keep trying to find someone who is more along the same wavelength as you. These women may be in the minority, but they are out there, they do exist. So bottom line, if this is an issue you experience, don't give up by any means, but don't try to change yourself and never settle either. To settle would be doing both you and your mate a disservice because it won't pan out the way either of you want it in the long run. Here's something to keep in mind if you ever feel like giving into this one. It's not a relationship you want. It's a happy relationship with a woman that also makes you happy. And of course, with whom you can make happy too. If you keep that goal in mind, it may help keep what you need to do in perspective. Guys, on that note, we're going to wrap things up right about now. I will be making a part 2 to this, like I just let you guys know a little bit ago. It probably is not going to be next week, but just stay tuned for that. If this content helped you in any way, or if you enjoyed the video in any way, if you hit the like button. But more importantly, if you ever plan on coming back to this channel, this lovely channel, growing channel of mine here, please also hit the subscribe button, because that will help you find your way back here a lot easier than if you just try to find it on your own. Trust me, I have problems finding my own channel all the time. So I hope everybody has a wonderful day. I hope you did get something out of this, and I do hope to see you back again. I really do. So I'm going to take my leave now, and until next time, have a wonderful day, a wonderful week.